Welcome back, Daisy Cakes! This is my final volume of my list of top 100 fantasy authors. Who am I? I am Daisy Ex Machina, the drag queen detective who investigates all things speculative in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. This is part 10 of 10 of my alphabetical list of 100 fantasy authors. It felt like this project would never end, but here we are. We are getting off to a rocky start. Rocky because this author should have been included in the last segment because Mickey Zucker's full name, her correct name, is Mickey Zucker Reichert. So she should have been included in part 9 with the R's, but I'm slipping her in now because this is my list and I'll do what I want. Mickey Zucker Reichert was born in 1962 and is active today. I have to have her on this list because she wrote one of my favorite fantasy series ever, the Renshei trilogy, which starts with The Last Renshei, published in 1992. Now, this is set or inspired by Norse mythology, Odin, Loki, all that, which I know is well-trod ground, but Reichert gives it a whole new twist. In the story, a prophecy claims the tribe of the Renshei will destroy Midgard, so all the other tribes gang up and kill all of them, or at least they think they do, but hey, there's at least one survivor, the last Renshei. But there's also this really interesting group of 4 wizards who govern the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, and are supposed to maintain the balance between good and evil and neutrality. I was obsessed with the original Renshei trilogy, which continues with The Western Wizard, published in 1992, and concludes with Child of Thunder, published in 1992. I think the series is brilliant. If you like a solid epic fantasy trilogy, check out the original Renshei trilogy. And if you like those, there are even more books in the Renshei universe. Sherwood Smith was born in 1951 and is very active today at the age of 73. Here's another author who really should be more recognized. She's a Nebula finalist, collaborated with Andre Norton and others, and is well known for helping other writers. She debuted with the novel Wren to the Rescue in 1990, a story she started when she was in high school and has since expanded that series to 7 novels. My favorite, however, is Inda, published in 2006. It is about a prince who is not the heir but the spare, who goes to a military academy to learn the art of war, but then his life is changed forever when a classmate dies and he ends up having to run off to the high seas and become a pirate. Yes, you heard me right, a pirate. This is the start of what I think is a really well-crafted series that continues with The Fox, published in 2007, and King's Shield, published in 2008, and Treason's Shore, published in 2009. If you like epic fantasy, and if you like pirates or stories set in the high seas, I think you'll absolutely love the Inda series. Next up is Mary Stewart, who was born in 1916 and died in 2014 at the age of 97. Mary Stewart did not start with speculative fiction. Rather, her debut was this cozy mystery titled Madam, Will You Talk, published in 1955. She mostly stuck with romantic mysteries until she published her greatest, or at least her most renowned work, on the Arthurian saga, which starts with The Crystal Cave, published in 1970. Now, before Stewart, the Arthurian legend was defined by T.H. White's Once and Future King series, which in turn was inspired by Thomas Mallory's Le Morte d'Arthur. Now, up until this point, the Arthurian legend was mostly about Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table and the triangle between Arthur, Lancelot, and Guinevere. What Mary Stewart did was focus on who I think is the most interesting character of all, Merlin. She retells the legend of Arthur from the point of view of Merlin, starting from the time when Merlin is a young boy and progressing up to his fall. If you are a fan of the legend of King Arthur or have any curiosity of what the legend of King Arthur might be like from Merlin's perspective, you have to read Mary Stewart's Arthurian Saga. Jonathan Stroud is a British author born in 1970 and is active today at the age of 54. He is a children's author, and you know there are several children's authors in my list, but I don't always recommend children's books to adults who don't read children's books, but there are some exceptions, and Jonathan Stroud's one of those exceptions because of the Artemis sequence that starts with The Amulet of Samarkand, published in 2003. The story is set in an alternate version of England where magic is very real and very regulated. The main character is Nathaniel, a 12-year-old boy who is also a very precocious, up-and-coming magician. Nathaniel summons the djinn Bartimus to help stop an evil magician from taking control of England. This is a lot darker and more political than, say, Harry Potter, and I personally think it was a lot better written, and I think a little bit more mature. The series has won tons of awards, and again, I think the writing itself is elevated, and Stroud uses humor in a way that doesn't get in the way of the story. Check it out. You know he was coming. If you have watched me at all, you know the fantasy author I practically worship. Yes, I'm talking about J.R.R. Tolkien, born in 1892 and died in 1973 at the age of 81. He was a veteran of World War I who went on to become a professor of English language and literature at Oxford. He was a gifted linguist who was called upon to be a codebreaker in World War II. But of course, his claim to fame came after writing a children's book called The Hobbit, published in 1937. This unexpected journey became an unexpected success, and the publisher convinced Tolkien to write a sequel. Well, the sequel kept expanding until it grew into The Lord of the Rings, the first volume of which is The Fellowship of the Ring, published in 1954. Now, as you may have noted, The Lord of the Rings is not really a children's book, not like The Hobbit, and that led to a rather tumultuous publishing history, but I think it is interesting that the first part of the story of Lord of the Rings, Bilbo's birthday party, reads more like The Hobbit than anything else before gradually becoming more serious or starker or darker when they get to Bree. Anyway, I know I'm not alone with being obsessed with Lord of the Rings. I think it may have to do with when I read it. I think I was in the 7th grade when I was first discovering books, so that made it more magical. And also, it may have been my generation. I don't know. I just love the books. I've reread them multiple times, and whether they are to your taste or not, it is indisputable that they are the template upon which all modern fantasy is based. I forget how I ended up finding this next author, but it is Emma Torzs. And I'm so happy I picked up her 2023 debut, Inkblood Sister Scribe. This is a contemporary fantasy where magic books secretly exist in our modern world, but only known to a select few. Abe Kalate is one of those who secretly protects his small little library of magic books, but then he violently dies and he leaves his books to his 2 daughters, Joanna and Esther. But they are given 2 very different instructions after his death. Joanna must protect the library and the books, and Esther must constantly travel, move from place to place, and never stop. I will say you need to give this book a few chapters to really get going. To me, for some reason, the writing the first couple of chapters seemed a little dense. But then after that, bam, it really gets going. As much as this is a contemporary fantasy, it is also a thriller, so get ready for a fast-paced, rip-roaring adventure that takes a few unexpected twists and turns. I'm probably going to get a little flack for putting this next author on this list, but it's my list. I am talking about Gore Vidal, born in 1925 and died in 2012 at the age of 86. He was a prolific writer, first published in 1946 with the mystery adventure Willawong that Vidal wrote when he was in the Navy at 19 years old. He became a bit infamous when the novel City and the Pillar was published in 1948, which is actually a pretty rebellious gay novel for the time. He went on to become a very prominent figure, being tenuously related to Jackie Kennedy and having open feuds with Truman Capote, William F. Buckley, and Norman Mailer. For his writing, Vidal is probably best known for his historical fiction series, Narratives of the Empire, about the unconventional history of the United States, which starts with Washington, D.C., published in 1967, and ends with The Golden Age, published in 2000. But I have a soft spot for his more speculative novels, notably Myra Breckinridge, published in 1968, and its sequel, Myron, published in 1974. But my absolute favorite is Duluth, published in 1983. Before the movie Inception, there was Duluth, the story about a novel, about a soap opera, who has the same characters as the actual town of Duluth, and what happens to the soap opera characters also happens to the citizens of Duluth, or vice versa. And there are flying saucers. This can only be described as trippy, it is funny, it is ridiculous, it is so meta. I really hope more people will discover this other side of Gore Vidal. Helene Wecker was born in 1975 and is active today at 49. Now, I was actually recommended this book when I was doing a video on Omegle and was asking people for book recommendations, and someone suggested The Golem and the Genie, Helene Wecker's 2013 debut. This one sounded really intriguing, and I ended up picking it up, and I am so glad I did. This is a historical fantasy set mostly in New York towards the end of the 19th century. The Golem was created by this renegade Jewish magician and is in the form of a woman named Shava, who tries to pass herself off as human when she is abandoned in the Jewish neighborhood of New York. The genie is accidentally set free by a tinsmith in the New York neighborhood called Little Syria. The genie's name is Ahmed, and he had been trapped in a bottle for 1,000 years. This is a story of the pyrotechnics caused by the meeting of these two strangers in a strange land. Ultimately, it's a clash, or it's a reconciliation of two cultures. It is really well written, and I cannot recommend it enough. Margaret Weiss was born in 1948 and is active today at 76. She is best known for her collaborations with Tracy Hickman, and if you are a Dungeons & Dragons fan, you probably know them for their Dragonlance Chronicle, starting with Dragons of Autumn Twilight, published in 1984, and my personal favorite, the Legend series that starts with Time of the Twins, published in 1986. This was a heyday of a D&D renaissance, and there were a whole lot of schlocky D&D novels back then, but the Weiss and Hickman books were, I thought, always of a high caliber. But my favorite series is when they departed from the D&D franchise and wrote the Deathgate cycle, starting with Dragonwing, published in 1990. This 7-book series is about the war between two powerful races, the Sartan and the Patrons. The Sartan won by sundering the world into 4 elemental realms and imprisoning the Patrons in the Labyrinth. The story is about Hablo, the first patron to have escaped the Labyrinth. These books contain a lot of familiar territory to D&D players, but there are so many little clever twists, and the world building is so unique that it, I think, stands above everything else they have written, at least in my opinion. And the writing is so fun and easy. It won't feel like you're reading a dense series, even though you are reading 7 books. I cannot sing the praises enough to the Deathgate cycle. especially if you're a fan of D&D. The last author on this list is Janny Wurts, born in 1953 and is active today at the age of 70. Her debut novel was Storm Warden, published in 1984. But my introduction to her was Daughter of the Empire, published in 1987, her collaboration with Raymond Feist, which was a spin-off on his Rift War saga. I personally think the Empire trilogy with Janny Wurts and Feist are the best of all the Rift War novels, and it's probably because of Janny Wurts. Her magnum opus, however, is The War of Light and Shadow. It's a series which is divided into arcs. I think you could read the first book, Curse of the Mistwraith, published in 1993, as a standalone. It is about two brothers. One can control the light, and one can control the darkness or shadows, and they are raised apart to be enemies, but then they are drawn together as allies to defeat the Mistwraith. I love the writing. I think this is a supremely talented author, and if you are into fantasy, you have to at least dip your foot into the genius of Janny Wurts. This is the end of my top 100 fantasy authors. Let me know what you think of these authors down in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also, if you like science fiction, I've also completed my list of top 100 science fiction authors. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.